Wolfpack.
Yeah, so like I was just wondering because I know out in BC doesn't really have rugby league, I would say, but
No.
this year
Yeah, they just started. Like I know, like a couple
they
of their
started.
unions.
It was it's basically a college development league where all the union coaches have their players. Apparently, it's pissing BC Rugby Union off.
Yeah.
So, like, I know UBC is playing. All the UBC guys are playing for this team called Point Grey.
Point
And
Grey Thunder or
basically-
something like that.
Yeah, Point Grey Thunder. So basically, I talked to Curry Hitchport about it. He's like, well, I hate sevens, and this is just my way of pissing people off.
But he's got a knack for doing that.
And then that's not part of Canadian Rugby League. That whole league is just basically a bunch of people that play union that have like took in. I don't know who these coaches are, but they're not from like the Canadian Rugby League thing that's going on. It's very interesting to sort of watch. It's a short season and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk about other things in rugby league, I guess.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is the Rouge Rugby podcast, and we have a special guest today. Aaron Castro from Earful of Dirt podcast is joining us today. Aaron, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. It's impressively hot out here in Arizona. Actually, today is a very nice day. I want to say it was 85 when I went for my run this morning, but it was
Canadian podcast, Celsius.
Yeah, Celsius. What's that?
What is that, like 22?
That's not bad. That's nice.
Imperial got us to the moon. So just
I've never heard someone. I have an American uncle who lives down in Florida, and I've never heard him use that as a argument point. And I think I'm gonna hold it against him. I think I'm gonna use that next time he tries to tell me the weather.
Imperial got us to the moon. Although I want to say Imperial definitely lost like a Mars probe, something like that. We like launched something, and they were like it like completely overshot and hit something on the like when it. So
like
there you go.
Or something.
So I mean, like for the most part, I know how to do metric, except in Celsius, or I don't do any of that.
Well, we appreciate you trying at least. So we're going to get started, and the first thing that we're going to start doing with some of our guests is we want to know, how did you get started in rugby, Aaron?
I guess the short story, it goes back to 2013, but I want to say 2004, sophomore in high school. I did some other project for our English project, but one of the guys in my class, he wanted to do rugby because he was half English, and there was no rugby clubs where we lived, and like there still isn't any rugby clubs where we live. But he got 30 guys together, and we learned how to play 15s from this guy who had, I guess, been a professional in England at some point in early professionalism, and now lived in California. And we didn't toy with the idea of trying to get a club together. We tried, but you run into those things called sports seasons that you just hit, and we all went our separate ways. And I went and played spring football. This guy went and swam. Guys played baseball, all that BS. We had a club in college. I didn't play there, but in 2009, I was at SM Saint-Cyr, or the French Military Academy, and we went into Rennes one time with a bunch of Sandhurst cadets that had come down for some competition that went down. And I remember the first. I had no awareness of the U.S. national team at this point, by the way, like no clue. And I watched Wales. It was Wales. I want to say it was Wales Ireland. Maybe was the first game I saw in a pub, drunk off my butt. In 2009, and just the way they played, the defense that Gatlin had at the time was amazing. Although offensively, this is I just watched. I didn't know what was going on really, and I watched how they played. And if defensively, they like Wales has been a great team. Attacking wise, some years they're good. Like this last year, they were very good. But many years they're not. But I really fell in love with Wales in 2009, and although I'm not in love with Wales now, so that's sort of the start. And then in 2013, I was in the Army at the time and was looking for a club. I was at Fort Knox, and the closest club was a long drive into Louisville. I lived on the south side of Fort Knox, and really, if I wanted to play rugby, where I chose to live was a really bad idea. But then I was going to try and play with that club, didn't. And then I moved to El Paso and with my unit shutting down, joined the El Paso Scorpions, played with them for a year and change. And then the Army team, Fort Bliss Warriors, stood up. Although for some reason I was playing wing with the El Paso Scorpions.
It seems to be where they put they put the newer.
They think that it doesn't take coaching to play wing. Apparently,
yeah.
I don't know, but I joined the Fort Bliss Warriors. That club no longer exists. It kind of lived the Army life of, I guess, post Global War on Terror clubs, and where some guys are able to get it together, get all the things done, and you'll last for 3 years, and then the guys that they're going to hand it off to are either PCSing or leaving the Army, like the 3 guys that were going to try and hand it off to, which was myself, a guy who's now at Fort Lewis, and another guy who I forget where he went. But basically, that's Army clubs. They'll stick around for 3, maybe 4 years, and then sort of disintegrate right now, which kind of sucks. Because Army rugby, and I'm sure Forces rugby in Canada before the GWAT as well was really like a huge thing, sort of like it is still in the UK. But and then I moved to Arizona and played a little bit with Phoenix Rugby Club. But I guess life and then getting hit by a vehicle while cycling really got in the way of getting back on the pitch. And some things I would say I'm letting things get in the way right now, but we're gonna get back out there. I'm a hooker by trade. Played hooker for 4 years and love it. Although Eric Howard and Ray Barkwell we're all like the same size. Right. But I am definitely not an international rugby player. But I just, it's kind of feel like, hey, I could be, I'm that size. But no, they're faster. I would say even, in his medical retirement, Ray Barkwell is still a much faster and fitter rugby player than I am.
I have a couple of guys that are part of my club that are they've been playing for the Ontario Blues this summer, and one of the guys was on the academy team for the Arrows when they went down and played the All Americans in Washington. And I'm the same height as them, but like they're just built differently. Like they're just like the prototypical prop. So it's I feel your pain
or something.
Oh God, yeah. Well, one of them is also like an iron worker. So he goes to Toronto and then like just does like hard manual labor, and like he's so strong. He hits the gym, but then like, he's just got like these like cement hands that like if he like stiff arms you, like you're feeling it like for like a week.
The difference between me or you and him is genetics. I'm gonna like same size, but like under the skin, there is something else going on for them than there is for any of us.
Yeah.
People.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And it's so
watching
great.
Rugby is fun too, guys.
Watching rugby is fun too, I guess. Well, yeah. And the reason why I ask Aaron is it's so interesting to hear people's stories about rugby. Yours kind of started through school and then ended up, finding your foothold in the military and eventually your club. It's something that I think rugby is one of those sports where if there's a club in town, you've got a spot to play, and that's always so nice. Who was the first rugby player that you really kind of fell in love to watch?
I want to say for a long time I had no awareness of the U.S. national team, so none of those guys are really the guys that I sort of look at. Although I went to the same college as Dan Lyles, so I try to find the VHS and put in the videotape of some classic Dan Lyle games. But guys like Richie McCaw, Sam Warburton, and James Haskell, because of just Sam and James played a little bit differently than Richie McCaw did. I would say in between of like the stylistically, Sam Warburton was really in the middle between Richie McCaw and James Haskell. James Haskell is just this massive high work rate type player. And then, Richie plays, especially now that I understand it more, played very hard on the edge. Like they say if he didn't play for the All Blacks, he would have gotten yellow cards out the yin yang. And we're talking about one of the 7s in the world that has the lowest yellow card rate for the amount of caps that he has ever played. And then Sam Warburton's, I would say, sort of like a hybrid, a very big work rate guy that also played very hard at the edge when it came to the breakdown. And this is, sort of why at 27, he retired last year. So, but those are the guys that I really sort of fell in love with. If you go back to, I guess 2012-ish, going all the way back to that. And I think back in 2012, Sam was like 21 at the time. Yeah. So like, that's when I started watching him play.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. Like with Haskell and Richie McCaw, like I remember those are two guys that when I started getting really big into rugby, they were kind of near the end of their careers, and so it was always kind of like one of those what ifs. Like I can always go back and watch some of them, but to be able to see it in time. And Derek, who is someone that you kind of fell in love with when you first started watching rugby?
Yeah, I think I'll kind of share your sentiments of like the kind of came in a little too late, maybe. I know when I first started playing rugby out of my high school. When I was in grade 9, it was the first year our school ever did a rugby team. So you basically ended up with about 25 kids that have never watched a rugby game before. So our coach basically decided to, bring everybody into a classroom and just threw on some classic games. But they would essentially always be all black games. For the most part, just because it's like, and he would just, this is what it's supposed to look like.
And you guys will never attain this, but this is what it's supposed to look like.
But there's also the cool thing about that is there's only at least those games exist, whereas there's probably no tape of like half of Rugby Canada's games.
No.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's part of it. It's like YouTube was, I think, just becoming a thing at that point too. So we would just obviously, like, so from that, like a lot of the All Blacks, like Jonah Lomu was a big guy for a lot of people, just because that was like the most entertaining highlight reel of any rugby player. A lot of guys got on, like Richie McCaw, Dan Carter, like all the big All Black guys that were from like around like 2000, like 2007 to 2010 when we were in high school. Was like, that was pretty much what my high school team would like watch in like the library and stuff, would just be everything All Blacks, Owen Franks, Brody Retallick, now Kieran Reid and stuff going forward too. It just kind of stuck with it that way as well.
Yeah, when I was in high school, I remember our coach brought us into one of the weight rooms and showed us like clips. I don't know how he got them, but like clips of like Aaron Carpenter tackling. And he's like, that's what it's supposed to look like. It's not going to look like that on the pitch, but if you can attain that as much as possible, go for it.
Yeah, and, if you guys knew what you were doing, it would look like.
Yeah. For me, it was, I remember watching the 2011 World Cup and really, watching some of those guys there. I remember when they all had the dyed blonde hair and looked ridiculous, and it was hilarious. And I remember when I was in university, I remember pro rugby starting, and I was like, this is the best thing ever. I'm gonna watch the thing. And then like I even like submitted a bunch of ideas, and when like halfway through the season they asked for names. I'm like, why didn't you do this at the beginning of the season? And then
and then became pro rugby.
Just a disaster. But I like, Ray Barkwell and Phil McKenzie were two guys that I really liked to watch, because I mean, they're some of the only Canadians in that
when your TV deal's on AOL and then stops broadcasting at some point.
Anyways, we're not going to get into that. We're not going to open up that can of worms. But this was a question, Aaron, that I was asked by a few people, and it's kind of an open-ended question. I think that's why so many people asked it. where do you see rugby going in North America? A lot of people like to be negative, and a lot of people like to, be overly positive about what's happening. So where do you see yourself in this growth for rugby in North America?
I think this is a really complicated question. It's sort of open-ended. I think you guys structurally at the grassroots are significantly better shape, because if you go all the way, we saw that hullabaloo that happened in Nova Scotia. You guys have in a lot of places, what we call varsity rugby, but where you have school clubs are not school clubs, and they're just straight high school teams embedded in most of your school systems. Because how all the way out in Nova Scotia, you got school rugby. Think about that. Like there is only one state that has high schools, we call them athletic association sponsor rugby, and that's in Massachusetts, and they only have like 30 high schools that have varsity rugby,
right?
And then the rest is hodgepodge of youth club stuff. And that's really like sort of the senior stuff. It can get very interesting, and getting into the weeds. But I think at the grassroots, you guys are a bit set up better than we are. But that sort of in a lot of ways that those setups are traditional and have nothing to do with the union, because both of our unions are financially a mess. The real difference between Rugby Canada and USA Rugby right now, and really the only difference is that we're winning and you're losing. Like we're both in. As far as I can tell, we're both financially a mess, and it's really hard to grow rugby when you have very little money. But I think professionally, we're in a good place. I think knowing some of the stuff on when it comes to the Major League Rugby and what it's taken to get to this spot, it's as long as the owners of the teams continually make this a phased investment model and support the grassroots, we can continue to expand both youth and senior rugby, and also like development opportunities for youth players, because down here especially, we don't really have a lot of provincial programs, and some of those provincial programs, it just depends on the year whether they're working. But for the most part, additional development stuff comes from, if you looked at what the youth club system looked like down here compared to the sports they're competing against, you have 10 to 12-year-olds driving an hour and a half for their nearest rugby match. Down here, that's like that's what in baseball or basketball or soccer, that's what we call club soccer, because you have local leagues and then you have the travel leagues. And basically rugby there is no localization of rugby for the most part outside of very, very few metropolises. I would say that if you look at Los Angeles and in SoCal overall, even though it's one of the highest density places for youth rugby, there is no density in the same town. You are traveling everywhere to play youth rugby. And then if you want to go higher, if you want to aim higher, you basically, rugby down here is, for some reason, the union said it was very cheap for basically a decade, and also said that it was the fastest growing youth sport in America when it was the fastest growing youth sport in America 1 year. And then they rode that cat for 9 more years, right? But if you want to develop as a rugby athlete, or your parents try to help you develop as a rugby athlete, it becomes very expensive, and it becomes likely more expensive than travel soccer, than travel baseball. Like rugby is at the youth level is actually, if you're a good player, is arguably more expensive than any other sport it's competing against. So that's on the youth side. But with MLR teams, and you increase those development systems and make them more affordable for youth players, I think overall, holistically, we're in a good place, as much as the unions and sub-unions are messed up, that because there is a professional league that, by all accounts, from what I have seen, will stick around. Maybe some of the teams will get sold. Maybe some of the teams will fold. but the people that are entering the league now are financially in a different place than the teams that entered the league originally.
Yeah, you said a couple of things there that I want to get your opinion about, Derek, because you did live the life of youth rugby player in Ontario. It is very similar for us, at least in Ontario, I should say. I mean, if you're not in Toronto, which I live an hour and 10 minutes away northeast, you still have to do some of those hour-long drives, but I do think that it's a little bit more structured. You've got provincial programs, high school, club, and then university, and then we have like a community college program. So there are opportunities for athletes. Derek, do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you think that it's a little bit more nuanced than that here in Canada? What do you think?
Yeah, I think like whenever, I mean, for a lot of sports, like if you take it out of like the mainstream sports and stuff, things like at least up in Canada, especially like hockey, like every city has a hockey league that's like 10, 15, sometimes 20 teams deep, for like youth players and stuff as well. But obviously, even in hockey, sometimes depending on where you live, you can still get some of those treks. I think for rugby in Canada, I think one of the big things is like if you want to talk about how to grow it and everything is having we typically have like we might have a lot of people playing rugby, but once you hit say like 20 years old or 22, 23 or whatever, it's like people just kind of stop playing at that point.
Yeah. If you're not playing at the university level or the college level,
people stop. Yeah,
people stop because it's quite an expensive sport. If I was lucky enough, I was only able I could do just a 2-week membership this year with my local club, but it's around like $450. And if you're just coming
at the senior level, they're at the senior level. I had to pay because you have to pay your USA Rugby membership fee. And at the senior level, I think there are some clubs that keep it really good. Like they hunt and they get sponsorships. And I think the last club I was in, I guess the club I'm in now, maybe I'm probably being like hounded by my club secretary and financial officer to pay my dues, but it's like $150 for a new player. And then it was $175 for a veteran, I guess. So once you've been there for a year, that's the cheapest club dues I've ever paid. And that's here in Phoenix. In El Paso with because there was another club I played with here in Phoenix for a little bit, and I was like, I'm out. But in El Paso, I spent it was over $300. I think it was like $350, and El Paso is like a real city. It's like I lived on one end and practice was on the other, and depending on if I left from work, it would be about 30 minutes. If I had gone home, it would be an hour to drive. So, all the opportunity cost that runs into that stuff. Yeah. I want to say at the senior level, costs are definitely something that drives people away, but that's sort of part of our, I would say, North American culture that amateur athletics has sort of dried up, but it dried up a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think about any club, any type of club, organizations, there's so many service clubs that are suffering, it's a pretty common thing across the board, not just in sports for adults. That social time that requires you to get out of your house now is becoming less and less. You know what? Let's move on, guys, because we've got a lot to talk about, and I've been dreading bringing this up, but we're going to talk about it. The PNC game, Canada versus the US. Very.
We're talking about the Fiji Japan game.
No, we're not going to talk about.
I haven't caught that. I did sort of catch this.
The Mud Bowl game.
I watched the Mud Bowl game. so this was bad. So I am an NBC, and I know some people over there, and so I was like tweeting at them and be like, "Yo, what the f?" Where at least where I was in Colorado at the time, and apparently other people were having issues with NBC Gold loading or NBC Gold the feed just staying stable, and like it wouldn't even load like on my phone or on my computer, nada. So I had like hard VPN out and. Apparently, the World Rugby website no longer it reads right through VPNs, but YouTube and Twitter we good right now, man. But I had to a VPN that you pay for, by the way. Like this one,
right?
I don't really use this thing at all, because I pay for Rugby because that's the only way to get more of it, right? But I had a hard VPN out and. So went on YouTube, watched the game, and it was so if you go all the way to the beginning and it started to rain, the field was in pretty good condition.
Yeah.
But if you about 20 minutes in, because it was raining that much, about 20 minutes in, you know this field is done. Like it's like if they play 60 minutes on this game, you're not going to be playing on this field for a month if it was in the United States. Like we're talking thousands of dollars in damage. We're done to this field, and it was kind of awful. To say I know what Tonga is going to be like for you. I don't even know what Samoa is going to be like this weekend for the U.S. because it was a lot of 8-man rugby just played in the mud, hold on the ball. Like there was it was disgusting. And I would say Tonga, if you go back to the last PNC, which is how they qualified for the World Cup, they are a very undisciplined team. I guess they get a little cynical here and there, and that's sort of what got Samoa over is that Tonga committed a penalty and they took a yellow. So they played with I think they got 2 yellows in that game. I'd have to go check.
Yeah, they got 2 yellows about 90 seconds apart from each other.
Yeah, so they were playing with 13 on, right? And Samoa is like just as athletic and stuff. So, but and they were able to pull it out in one of the. I mean, I've played in games like that. Not a fan. I mean, well, they're fun at the time.
They're fun at the time, but like when you think about it afterwards, they're like that kind of wasn't great. I think the argument that a lot of people are making is like, yeah, that's great for like club rugby, but this is supposed to be like a World Rugby sanctioned event.
Level in the world.
But at the same time, the World Rugby can't control the weather. I mean, and at the same time, they're not going to go to every field and
so
the
pitch before the game was certified by World Rugby to go because this was a World Rugby tournament. The issue is, unlike Twickenham, Apia Stadium does not have a next level alien engineered drainage system. Okay, let's just because the last game I saw,
that's a good point.
The last game I saw that was at Twickenham, it was raining that bad, but the difference in grass used and the difference in drainage system sort of the best game that was in the MLR season that reminds you of this is that Seattle, San Diego.
Oh, the monsoon game.
Hurricane game.
Yeah.
Where I'm thinking this field is done. This field is done, like for the next week. And they played a game on it, and it was perfect. Maybe Samoa needs to call up the University of San Diego groundskeeper. But basically, I have no idea other than to tell you that when you play Tonga, they're undisciplined.
That's good. We just hopefully we got somebody that can kick then.
Yeah. And I watched a little bit of the Japan-Fiji game. It was an interesting way. Japan did a really good job of keeping their defense a solid line, and Fiji's they're just so well known for just getting that ball out wide and offloading it so quickly, and you really got to give props to Japan for what they did defensively, and they really took it to them offensively as well. Like the box kicking in that game was very impressive. So I was really impressed by Japan. I hope that they have a really good World Cup. I would love to see them it makes some magic. I think I'm one of the only people that like their World Cup jersey, so we'll see.
So they don't. I would say they looked bad when they released them, but they don't look that bad in person.
They look good on.
Unlike every other Canterbury jersey that has been released for the year, Japan's at least look different.
I think the Canterbury jerseys are fine. I don't like the cut. Like my wife described it, it looks like a workout, like a girl's workout shirt with like the fabric at the back. Like I don't get that part.
I don't necessarily think the Canterbury jerseys are ugly. It's a template, and it's just
boring. It's boring.
It's not
every team looks.
So if I went back to the last time the U.S. was supplied by Canterbury. This one is not the worst I've ever seen.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen like the last time they were our kit supplier, they used us as like an experiment machine, and it was I didn't like anything we wore. Well, no, there was this one. I want to say maybe 2001. It wasn't a World Cup kit, or no, maybe it was the 2011 World Cup kit. It was red, white, and blue hoops. That is the only kit I liked. Because the rest of them were just some experimental BS.
I just want the U.S. shorts to be like the American flag, like the star, like
the Apollo Creeds.
Yeah, that's what I like.
All right.
Okay, so the U.S. versus Canada. So one thing that I found interesting, before we even get into the performance, was looking at the performance based on the rosters that the U.S. put out. And I'm comparing it to the ARC game, which was a much closer game. And, you know, in my opinion, and you guys can argue with me, their ARC lineup, their front row was much better. And, you know, David Anu, Mighty Joe, and I mean, Paul Mullen, you can toss one way or another. But, you know, they had Ben Landry, Nick Savetta, and, you know, they had Hanko in that game. And then other than that, you know, it was Paulie Lasike was in the match instead of Isofo. Mikey Tio was in that game. So, you know, there was a few guys in the ARC game that I honestly think that lineup looked a lot more impressive than the one they put out in this last game, and yet they showed up.
I didn't even go back and look at the rosters. I didn't even think, but yeah, like up front, I would say that like the Type 5 as a group is much stronger than the Type 5 group that went out. Like just as a combination pairing, because this was basically a whole different combination. And that was what, like, I had made some comments that it looked experimental because a lot of the combinations were different. The spine was very solid. A bunch of guys that have gotten a bunch of different caps under Gary Gold, because with Aj McGinty on there, like, and Sean Davies together, you're talking about, you know, a halfback fly half pairing that is like peas in a pod, you know, peanut butter and jelly. Like that was, you know, they've started many games together under Gary and previously, so they have that chemistry. And then you know, so the spine was, and then you bring in this Will Hooley character, you know, from that has, and so the spine was enough because you had Fawcett, who's this just high work rate guy, Cam Dolan, and you know, at number 8, it was just ready. Like as a combination, like the other combos were kind of weird, and I thought it was like, okay, so some of these guys are definitely, some of these guys are going to get left behind, like when it comes to Japan. And I thought you know, someone said, hey, every single one of these players is a great defensive player. I valid, because I've seen a lot of these players like come through. But when I saw the Canada roster outside of Peter Nelson, I was like concerned. I was pretty concerned. In hindsight, well, obviously, you know, Gary and Co. Well, they made me eat my words, as they tend to do, because they're smarter than me. But it was interesting because I did speak with Kingsley. I need to get this audio up I did speak with Kingsley, and I did speak with Greg McWilliams, our attack coach, that, I don't think you guys are going to see too many changes. I think that's a second. That's the next question. So I'll get back to that. But as far as just sort of this game went, I thought roster-wise, you guys had a stronger roster up front. And then on the back end, we obviously know that was different. Knowing the way that Gary's trying to have us play is sort of, I wouldn't say sort of Southern Hemisphere rugby in a lot of ways, 2 5/8 on the pitch at all times. And we had that with Will Hooley and Aj McGinty, right? And then also sort of with a little bit with Madison Hughes, but I don't. Madison Hughes is a downgrade from even Will McGee.
Yeah.
I think Will McGee and Will Hooley are very similar players in a lot of ways. But unlike Josefo, who basically showed that he is a world-class, wing center type that we've, I'd see I think he had 2 caps off the wing before, and I'm like, okay, this guy needs to stick around, and then just hasn't been available. And now I'm wondering, is some MLR team going to offer him a contract enough that gets him away from the sevens program that's going to Tokyo, because he was lights out.
He played extremely well.
He was really good, and they really liked him in camp. Yes, they liked Jamison Fondana Schultz in camp. Apparently, Reichert Hadding was called into camp after the retirement of Samu Manoa, but he had a knee infection, so he actually.
That's something I was going to ask, and with Nick Civetta's injury, does that open up a spot? Can Hate play lock? I don't know what.
Hate can't play lock right now because
of the knee infection.
He had to get his knee drained. You've got I saw we were already in Fiji. I didn't see anyone new that was called up. You've got Greg Peterson, great guy, who. As far as if you go towards world-class lock pairings, if you went Civetta and Peterson, the 2 giants, that was different. But I think right now, for this next game, we're going to have Peterson and Landry. That's going to be fine. I need to go back and look to see who our 4th lock is. But I was surprised that David Tamilau wasn't called in, or CC Mahoney wasn't called in. Guys who were named in the outer squad. But also say Lou Stanfill named in the outer squad, but hasn't been called up yet. Lou Stanfill isn't a 5, and we need a 5. So a guy who's wasn't named in the outer squad is Matt Jensen, who's 6'8" out of the Warriors. So a tight head jumping lock is what you would be I would be looking for personally.
Right.
Or they just call Samu, say, hey man.
Hey, please.
You're playing in the World Cup. Here's your ticket. Make sure you're fit, and it'll happen. But
so Derek, what do you think? In terms of you looking at the Canadian roster, who really? We're not going to say disappointed, because all those guys played hard. But who is someone that needs to kind of relook back at the tape and say, okay, I need to step up my game if I'm going to Japan. You can't, and you can't say everybody.
Can't say everybody.
Can't say everybody.
Everybody's the answer. You lost 47-19, but realistically, if you got to highlight one, Benoit Piffero had a real bad game, especially with the line-out throw. There was a lot where obviously the Americans were able to steal it. There was a handful where he just got flat out penalized for not throwing it straight. I think, what was that stat that came out that it was Canada was 43% or something on their own lineouts, which is obviously which is obviously just not good enough. I think I think if you going forward, Andrew Quattrin, in my opinion, has to start against Fiji this weekend. I would have Eric Howard coming off the bench too, because it's just one of those things. If those guys are playing well, it might with that game, it might be tough for Piffero to come back in the lineup after that.
Yeah, well, it's hard because there's no word on it was if Howard was injured or if they just want to see what Piffero and Quattrin could do. Or so I agree with you. I think that there needs to be a change there. And, it's hard to kind of – I think we've agreed that, Patrick Parfait played pretty well. He had actually a couple of really nice kicks, but I don't think that he's the solution at 15. It's just hard for me to believe there. I think that at best for me, he's an impact sub that can kind of go anywhere.
I thought so. I would look even with DTH. Honestly, I thought your back three played pretty poorly. Like DTH did some DTH did some DTH things.
Yeah,
because he always does DTH things.
That's the gift of being a talented rugby player.
With Hassler out, I mean, we knew that this game plan really looks, with the way the Eagles played, they were going to challenge the back three. Even like Hassler is a dynamic wing, and having him would have been better, but I'm not sure because Parfrey and DTH both did not really respond well and did not win a lot of their exits. That these amazing box kicks from Sean Davies, like I ask, sort of the rugby media, as it were, in America about Eagle Nine's box kicking. I think I cringed a lot when Mike Petrie was box kicking this year. But I think we figured it out how we were going to use box kicks, at least in this game. And it was all about putting pressure on the back three and not allowing you guys to win your exits, which is where all these, like the pace and the defense that this team that the Eagles played with. And there wasn't, I'm not going to say there wasn't energy, but there wasn't, with the speed and pace that defense put pressure on the back three, I don't really know if it's fitness. There wasn't transition to rally to establish a breakdown that would allow you to pull the pressure off when they got tackled.
It felt like that second try, which bounced off the flag, just you could see it in DTH when it happened, and Connor Traynor messing up pretty early with that dropped ball when he went to catch it. It just seemed like a lot of things were affecting them quickly. A lot of things went bad quickly for Canada, and then it just kind of swept in.
Interestingly, because one of the things that Greg McWilliams stated is they were in the first 30 minutes, we had a lot of turnovers we just gave the Eagles just gave Canada the ball, and the defense transitioned and limited. You had no possession, got the ball and then committed errors, and the Eagles were able to make it happen and limit any, when you had the ball inside the Eagles 22, it turned over really fast.
I think too, that was kind of part of it, is that I think, we can say DTH, Trainer, they all had really quiet games offensively as well from the wings, but it was just Canada's offense just seemed to be attacking in such a simple manner that it became really easy for the Eagles to read, because the ball would just essentially just travel down the line, and they would just try to go 9, 10, 12, 13 DTH. And I think the USA kind of really picked up on that, and we're able to start reading, and because it's a super easy attacking structure to read. So I don't know, it's kind of one of those things too. Hopefully Canada changes that up a little bit. Once the yellow card was given out in the last 10 minutes, they kind of looked like they were sort of starting to take advantage of some different looking looks stuff, but there's also less guys on the field, so it's obviously easier to find a hole with that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, and that's something that's been pointed out before about Canada's structure, is that it's plain, it's simple, and maybe that's because there's been a lot of moving pieces, but now it's time to start, getting down to business. The next thing I wanted to talk about, guys, was, Peter Nelson didn't have the best game. He's shown flashes of why, he was kind of poached by Canada, but then he had really, really poor moments as well. So do we think he's still the answer? Do we think he needs another chance? I'm of the mindset that O'Leary needs to start. You can go look back at a couple episodes in the last couple, few months that we've done this, and I've banged that drum. What do you guys think? Do you think it's O'Leary? Do you think it's Gordon McRory, who was the fly half for the repechage, or do we think we give Nelson another chance, or is it a combination of all the above?
So, yeah, I think I have the benefit of I had the benefit of speaking to Kingsley after the game, so
Sure.
I'm going to sort of bring that into it. So I went into this game not expecting anything really good to happen with Peter Nelson, and then I spoke with Toronto Arrows general manager at the game, Mark Winokur, and he's like, "No, I'm pretty sure he's going to play well." So I tempered my expectations, but I thought he was going to play bad,
Right.
because he hadn't played professional level rugby in some time. And basically we're talking like a year and a half's worth of Sundays. If someone said a month of Sundays, but basically he hadn't played for Ulster in a while. But seeing that some guys are in the doghouse, and somehow don't know how to get out of the doghouse, or they're not told how to get out of the doghouse, specifically, O'Leary for some reason, although he was selected. So there is that.
I was very surprised by that. I was surprised that he's on the roster still.
I think that based on Kingsley's comments, I think the intent is that they sort of found the qualities in a test level 10 that he doesn't think he had previously with O'Leary and McRory. But if I was a Canada fan before that, when that roster came out, I had some questions, because we're talking about a guy that had just led the RFU championship in points. Like, O'Leary's a good player. Like, let's not, say he's not a good player. So his inability to earn starting selection, and then you compound that with Canada's results, right, has been probably made you guys pull your hair out. And Gordon McRory's a scrum half.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know.
So, I don't think you guys like.
Tyler Arjon can play 10 if we start winning. That's fine by me.
That's another one. So do you think Tyler Arjon needs to play 5?
I mean,
and then we throw Luke Campbell in at 8. I mean,
Rumble can play 8. But
because that was one of, I would say that was one of the reasons why we dominated the scrum, is that our lock pairings was a lot stronger. That's why we, they were able to turn the screw every time. We stole a few scrums, and it just shows there's two things that go wrong. There were some technique issues, I thought, but the technique issues were exacerbated by the strength issues.
Mm-hmm.
That's because we talk about technique issues, especially with Glendale and their locks, and one of the biggest things for me being a front rower is, especially the front rower that only can use one foot, is your lock pairing, how strong they are. Because their technique and their strength is really what's going to stop you from going backwards. Now, the technique of your props is what's going to stop you from getting blown up. But if they can't, if they can't push, and then your 8 and your 6 and your 7 can't push that one shoulder in on those butts, you're going to go backwards. And we saw that. It was. Where I understand the point of Arjon playing number 8, because he played number 8 for the Chiefs most of the year, but the question is, who's stronger? And right now I think he's probably one of the strongest guys on the team, and you need to put him at 5.
Yeah.
The Chiefs, I think he's played Arjon at either 4 or 5.
He started the year at 8 because their 8-man was injured.
Yeah.
And then when the 8-man came back, he floated to lock and spent, I probably would say, about 2/3 of the season at lock. Mm-hmm. But it comes down to this, and I agree with you. I think that, I would like to see what Mike Shepard can do at the test level. I mean, he looked so good at the repechage, looked so bad at the ARC, looked really good with the Arrows. So I don't know if there's an injury there, or they again wanted to see what Connor could give.
Were we overly impressed with like Connor Keys during this game? Or?
No, I was more impressed in the game that he played against the U.S. the last time they played. This time he didn't really offer a whole lot, and compound that on top of the scrum problems.
Exactly. I think if you wanted to do something, like you could probably slide. Like I wouldn't be against Tyler Ardron playing lock, especially if it kind of helps someone like what Aaron was saying, helps out the strength a little bit there. But yeah, because I think like Lucas Rumble, Luke Campbell, like they can both play 8. I'd rather have Rumble starting at 8 over Campbell, but it's like I think like you kind of have that option. Olmstead, Ardron in your engine room might not be the worst thing.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Now, if Ardron can quickly grow as much hair, even more impressive. So Tyler Ardron, if you're watching this, which you're probably not, or listening to this, start growing your beard.
Oh, yeah, the mandatory Canadian lock has to have a beard. Yeah,
hairiest engine at the World Cup. That is my goal. But let's move on, guys, because we want to keep close to this timeline. What should Canada prepare for Fiji? And it's funny, I wrote this before that news about Fiji's lineup injection. So like now it's just like, what are you gonna do?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of. You see that like that video on Twitter where the Fijian coach was like, "We're gonna unleash some new artillery this weekend." And I mean, I don't know what that means, but
I hadn't. Wait, he said this. Oh my! I need to find that.
Yeah, this it's on like the Fijian. What's it? I think at Fiji Rugby, the official.
Okay, I'll check that out. Yeah, we're gonna leash some artillery.
Yeah, this is.
I'm not sure they're gonna need it.
Artillery this weekend.
I'm not sure they're gonna need it.
And I'm like, guys, you're ranked like 12 spots higher than us in the world. You can save the artillery. Save the artillery for Samoa or Tonga. Who do they play next? Tonga. Samoa. Save artillery for like Samoa or something after.
So, like, I guess the question is, what can Canada do to prepare for Fiji? I wrote on the thing. I said, pray, fight like in hockey, because on You're Full of Dirt, we sort of bantered about this, but I don't think in North America you can pinch someone's butt like that and get away with it. You could slap. You could slap and give them a good game, or you could just grab the tuchus. You could get some meat. You can't pinch.
No,
because I don't think Phil Mack is gonna take being pinched kindly.
Phil Mack has a temper. Like there's been a couple times, like either Seattle or Canada, where he has just lost his mind on somebody. And I'm surprised he doesn't get more red cards or yellow cards than he does, because he can go a little. That's white red mist kind of thing.
To be honest though, would that be the worst thing in the world if like the Fijian guys can get some of these Canadian lads mad? Just be get some of these guys angry, man. Like at least go hit people.
Yeah.
If the other team's gonna have the ball the entire game, like make them feel it. So I don't know, maybe if they got angry, maybe that would kind of help. I don't know. I think like to prepare for Fiji, I don't know. I think like following the American game, it's like I think some of the stuff that we've been talking about so far, I think just maybe mix the lineup up a little bit, just to kind of like if it's not so much like like Aaron was saying that it's probably going to stay somewhat similar, but maybe some of those guys that started on the bench against the U.S. give them the starters jerseys this week. Like toss Quattrin in 2, put Brower and Rob Brower in the number 1 jersey, and let's see how they fare. Because there's a lot of positions, in my opinion, that are still up for grabs, and there's really nobody like maybe other than Tyler Ardron, and that's like that from the USA game, you could say like really helped solidify their spot on this team. So like I don't know, I would like to maybe even try like Peter Nelson, move him back to fullback. where he played a lot of Ulster and let like he's does Ed like put O'Leary at 10, move Nelson back to Ulster. Just make some changes to show that try to figure out those combinations.
If you throw Peter Nelson back to 15, right? Like he showed that he could kick the ball and play. He showed that he's a good distributor. He showed that he's a decent attacking player. That gives you, and you put O'Leary at 10, that gives you two sort of fit second 5/8, so two playmakers on the pitch at the same time. Yeah. And that's why the U.S. was able to just kick some serious butt, was put the ball in the right part of the field and then use their set piece.
Yeah.
And I think that's and with that back line and the centers, with the way Jones likes to, favorite his guys like Lesage and Blevins, if they're going to be part of the lineup, I'm not opposed to having as many playmakers as possible. If it comes down to, if Hassler and Paris both get back in the lineup, they're at wings, throw DTH at one of the center positions, which he has played before for Canada. And I believe he played a little bit of center for the Ospreys as well. You've got options there that I think that you can put Nelson and utilize that kicking game that he showed success with. But, we will see. That game is on at 1:15 a.m. in the morning on TSN. So I will be camping. So thankfully we will have cable. So let's see if I can stay up long enough to watch it.
Camping with cable. You bring in a satellite dish.
It's camping, but it's
man. That's not
camping, but it's up at like my parents' trailer. They have like a stationary trailer, and like our neighbors it's not actually camping.
They call that glamping.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basic glamping. I just don't have any cell service.
Me and my girlfriend went camping last year, up near Georgian Bay and at Killbear National Park or Provincial Park, and there was these people in the campground to set up this 20-foot projector screen, and we're just crushing the Avengers on while they were camping. It's just it's okay, this seems not why you would come up here, but sure.
Listen, I will take as many amenities.
Just a 20-foot projector screen with G versus Canada on it.
I remember when I was young, we used to watch because you'd start camping in May and the Stanley Cup would still be on, so we'd watch the Stanley Cup right by the fire. But you know what? When you're going camping with a 10-month-old baby, you take as many amenities as you can because it gets complicated. But anyways, we're gonna move on because the one reason that we wanted Aaron on was because he was in San Diego for the Super Series, the women's mini tournament, however you want to phrase it. And he was on the ground level. He watched a lot of rugby. He was able to kind of get the news while everyone else was kind of just sitting at home kind of watching it. So the first question I have for you, Aaron, is what was the level of competition like for Rugby Canada and the other women's teams?
They originally advertised it as the top 5 women's teams in the world, and it was as far as the rugby was concerned, because there was a lot of chatter about stuff.
This question is rugby.
But the rugby, we're talking. I'm not a good player. Okay, but I would say this is some of the best. When you watch these teams play, and this is some of the best rugby that you will be able to see. And it's really cool that I can see so much of it. Because it was 6 hours away, so we drove out for 2 rounds to watch, and it was the 5 best teams in the world. That was true. For the U.S., we didn't have a coach for over a year, so we did not go on a tour or anything. So we're going through a whole new development cycle under Rob Kane, a cycle that Canada, though, you guys went through. I know Francois Rottier retired after the World Cup, I believe, but you guys appointed a coach. Sandro Fiorino, I believe it.
I believe so, yeah.
Was appointed pretty fast, right? and went on tour. And you went through your development cycle almost immediately after the World Cup and had a 3-test tour against England, where, I mean, they, well, you know, you guys got beat up pretty bad. But
I remember that specifically. It was,
but you capped a lot of new players because a lot of players had retired and pulled out for rest because this tour, you know, the World Cup was in August and this tour was in November. So there really wasn't a whole lot of time. But I think you got to see some of the depth within Canada because sort of like us and a little bit of New Zealand, when it comes to World Cup time, all of your sevens players, or at least previously for us, and you guys have put up their hands to compete with the 15s team. So you sort of didn't see, everything that could come, but some of those women were with the and same with the United States were training for the Pan American Games. But you guys are well drilled, know your system. A few different ball bounces here, especially in that New Zealand game, and definitely in that England game. You create some upsets, and winning by 2 or losing by 2 to England when there was just I think if that game ended 2 minutes earlier, you win the game by 3. I think it was what was the difference in the score at the time. So, like, Le Rouge women, or Le Rouge, if we're going all French, Les Rouges Féminines,
Les Rouges
Féminines, competed at a very high level all 4 games. Although you finished 4th, there's really nothing to not hang your hat on because you were very physical with New Zealand, put them out of their comfort zone, and then with England you almost got it, and France was also a pretty close game as well. But we're not really here to talk about the US, so we'll move on.
Yeah, and I think the next thing, and then Derek, I want you to kind of put your 2 cents in this as well, is this was such a great event. Put all the chatter aside. This is something that's important for development of the sport, especially for women. I mean, rugby in Canada, and I'm going to make the assumption in the US as well, is one of the only contact sports for women because hockey doesn't have legal contact. So what needs to happen, and I want your opinion from both of you guys, what needs to happen for this event to be a consistent event happening?
So this event was an extension of the last Super Series, but the last Super Series happened 3 years ago in 2016. In 2017, after our warm-up games, or I wouldn't call them warm-up games, but our spring test series against you guys, which was down at Chula Vista, you guys went to, I don't know what the tournament was called, but you, England, New Zealand, and Australia assembled in New Zealand for a warm-up tournament, sort of like the PNC is, and you played a series of 3 games against New England, New Zealand, and Australia. And so you sort of had that, but it wasn't the Super Series. But you still had a consistent high level tournament, which is almost impossible in North America. In this whole hemisphere, because the last time there was another active women's 15s program. I know that Sudamerica Rugby is starting to kick the tires and tell their unions to start doing stuff. But the last time there was another women's 15s program in RAN, I want to say it was 1993. I forget what team it was, but there's no other women's 15s program in Rugby Americas North. So we don't have the ability to have consistent competition like the Six Nations do, and like the women's rec, like Spain and Portugal and all them have. So we don't have these years where we always have 10 tests like England. Even in if you go down to Australia, the Black Ferns were running on like 5-6 tests a year play some. They don't call it a Bledisloe thing for the women between Australia, but they played Australia, 3 times a year, and they play like I think Fijiana, and then they go on tour also. So that. But for us, the biggest thing in the women's game is getting fixtures, because there aren't a lot of women's 15s programs, and those that do exist sort of out in parts of Europe and parts of Asia, their level is so low that you can't have them play the Black Ferns,
right? Because
they will just get run over. You can't. So us and Australia and the Black Ferns and Canada, we're missing that consistent competition, and that competition can't come locally because it doesn't exist. It's getting a little bit better in Oceania. Fiji, Samoa women, I think Tonga women, this is one of the first years that they've sort of been consistent. Papua New Guinea, they just sort of had a women's Oceania Cup type thing, which they're trying to get going. But, just getting fixtures for the US and Canada is difficult. So let's just take that first. So even if you put this on a rotating basis, but I think rotating basis might take away from whoever is the host or one of the hosts. But if you put this on a rotating basis where the US or Canada host it, because one of the years in the old Super Series, England hosted it. And why do they need to host it? Because they have the Six Nations and they host autumn tours. Yeah. So they don't need the Super Series. No. But the US and Canada do. And part of the exercise of this whole thing is and same with men's tests as well, is being able to have the capacity to promote these games. And promotion isn't just putting up billboards, but it's running the event so that you can make money at it. Because right now, guess what? France and England, England women are a profit generating business. France women are a profit generating business. For the US and Canada, I would say test rugby, not just women's test rugby, is a loss leading business, because we haven't developed the business side of the equation to fund our program. So I think consistent promotion along with consistency of the tournament itself. So next year, let's say Canada has it. Then the next year, the US has it. You just keep it continuously, because if you don't have it, then it's out of sight, out of mind. And that's sort of what was difficult for the US and Canada men, is that, we didn't have just a tournament so that we could get developed, because the tournament, like the fixtures themselves are development opportunities for the teams, but they're also off-field development opportunities for the unions. So you could have the games, I guess, on a training pitch without cameras and give it a have the points contested, but then you lose the promotion development opportunities. So, it's really hard to compare us, against tier 1 nations that have, clubs like Harlequins women. They just changed the name from Harlequins ladies, but Harlequins women, that's a really old club. And, they had last year, not this last Six Nations, but they had a Six Nations test. No, it was the same weekend as the Six Nations, where the England was down in France for a women's test record of attendance. And they had over 6,000 fans at the stoop, setting a women's club rugby record for attendance. And so that's the difference between where women's rugby is here, where women's rugby is over there. Yeah.
What do you think, Derek, about that? It's hard to tell people when they watch women's rugby and they say, well, it's not the same level as the men's rugby, but it's like it's a catch-22. It's like, it's not going to get any better if we don't promote it and we don't get these girls test matches, like Aaron just said.
Yeah, I think part of it, I think Aaron started to touch on it there. You need more promotion, more advertising, things like that. Hopefully, if you can find some really great sponsors or something that are willing to, pump more money into specifically on the women's side of the game, that'd be
the Tim Gordon Super Series.
Yeah, it came up I think it came up during like the whole Nova Scotia nonsense thing there, where they were like a lot of the great the high school girls were saying like one of the big complaints about rugby being taken out was that there's no contact sport for them. So like if you take away like, and especially for things like that, like obviously you can't take away opportunities to play, but I think too, like it could come down to like just, local clubs and stuff, and even being like, make sure like, local clubs are providing an outlet for, women who want to play rugby to actually come and be able to do it. Hopefully, a handful of them can get really good to the point where they're going to be, on a national team and stuff, and just kind of like, you do have to start to some extent from like the grassroots level, and just like more just in general promotion and stuff of the women's game from top to bottom would only benefit it really.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too. And I think exposure is such a strong thing in any type of sport. But at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to: is you need to give these girls exposure to show that it can be something that's attainable. I think that's also what pro rugby has done for rugby in general here in North America. Now, the last question for you before we let you go, Aaron, about this is who really impressed you from the Canadian team, and someone that we might want to keep an eye on?
I guess the first one you might not need to keep an eye on, because she's more, I guess, she and I are more generationally similar than some other people. Yeah, Captain Alyssa Allery. She's been a long time Canada national team player. She's gotten it done like for a long time. I remember she was playing wing the first game I saw her play this time, and she was loud. Like she was communicating the entire time. And then the last game I saw her play, she had been named captain as Laura Russell had to withdraw because of injury. That was sort of an embarrassing moment because I totally didn't read the email that showed me that there was a change, and I was introduced to her, and I shook her hand and I said, Laura, and she was like, Alyssa. And I was sort of, and I pride myself on getting this stuff pretty much correct all the time, and I was just it was pretty rough, but she was really cool. She's really awesome. I think the audio we have is up. Man, it was a month ago. So if you go on to earfulofdirt.com somewhere, you can find the audio. But she was really cool. And then when she moved to fullback in the next round that I saw, like she marshaled that team very well around, and you just see what how much experience she has. Another player I would say fell for. Like this is a very young woman. She's 20 years old, but as a player, you're like, wow. You wouldn't know Sophie DeGood is 20. Just other the fact that she just got capped, right? This is something that we don't have down in the United States, in that she is, I would say, a child, the progeny of two national team players. Her mother was, I believe, the first women's captain of Canada Women 15s. And then Hans de Good was a long-time provincial player in BC, and also was on Le Rouge 15 as it were. So like you have
we are French only by name, so don't look for us to answer.
So Rugby Canada men's, like she's the child of two former national team players. We don't like that's different, right? That's sort of something you only see in more mainstream sports, where the children of, great hockey players also end up somehow becoming great athletes, either in hockey or somewhere else, or, great football players. Their kid becomes a great baseball player, or even becomes a great football player again and plays for the same NFL team or stuff like that, that's a really cool story to think about. And this is a person, like, she's 20 years old. She was a U20 before the Super Series in both U20 selection for the women in both basketball and rugby for Canada. that's a high level athlete that you guys got.
Yeah.
She also kicks.
Yeah,
which is very strange to watch.
I want to ask about that. Yeah, I saw that. It's like, yeah, it's kind of interesting to see the number 8 kicking.
That was
Success.
that was so impressive. I'm not gonna lie, most number 8s don't got foot skills.
I don't think any other number 8s.
So she was just like the high levels of skills that she has were, very high. So like I said, her father and mother, both Canadian national team players, and then Paige Ferries. She actually sort of bounced around, I would say, collegiately. She went to 3 different colleges. She won a bunch of awards when she was in the Ontario University. I think she was at University of Ontario. I don't know, but she's playing. She plays for West Shore. Most recently, she came out of the UVic Vikes program, and on the wing, like, very good player. Like, so I think your collegiate system because women's rugby has U Sport designation. We have a small little smidge of NCAA rugby, but we don't have like full on NCAA designation for you. And that was something when I listened to your last podcast, I wanted to touch on, but when we sort of wrap this up, but those were 3 really good players for you guys that I was really impressed with.
What about you, Derek? Was there anybody from the tournament that you saw that really kind of impressed you with their play from Canada?
Yeah, I think I was kind of along the same lines as Aaron. I think like Sophie DeGood was just it was just like something to see. Like the number 8 like successfully and like routinely kicking goals is amazing. It's a pretty cool sight to see, and it's kind of pretty awesome that she's Canadian too. So that hopefully that she's only 20 years old, so maybe it's good signs for the women's program going forward. That's
for sure. Well, Aaron, we want to thank you very much for coming on, man. We really appreciate this. If anybody wants to find his work, earfulofdirt.com, Aaron.
Yep.
We'll have all his writing, and at Strobro on Twitter, he is constantly dropping all the new contracts being signed, mostly by NOLA, but and Earful of Dirt podcast is on every provider for podcasts. So
I guess the last thing when I listened to you guys and you were talking, and there was chatter about this, about probably mostly generated by me, but you guys talked about U Sport or NCAA designation. Well, so men's rugby outside of Ontario, within Ontario, it is not U Sport, but men's rugby in Canada is not U Sport designated. The reason why Toronto Arrows players are actually able to maintain, I guess, eligibility, it has nothing to do with the club system, because it's an OUA varsity level sport. They sort of fall under like the same stuff. I spoke with Mark Winnicke about this, and with Ontario, with University Association, it's about compensation. If players are not making over the poverty line, since it's not U Sport, it sort of doesn't matter. Whereas for some reason, university club rugby coaches, and I say coaches and not collegiate administrators, made the decision to try to be NCAA-like. Guess how many people at the national office work with college rugby that have to process all the paperwork every year for 20,000 plus students? There's 2 of them. Like, we're not set up to be like the NCAA. And so on the men's side, for some reason, the coaches said, hey, we want to be amateur. And Derek did mention sort of like the pros, like we're like playing in games with pros. They've borrowed that into D1A and I think Division 1 AA, which is really weird. Don't get me wrong. But national team level stuff, which is this, because our collegiate All-American program has actually been going a very long time. it's like whether they played because against these other guys that were pros, because it is national team stuff, it's sort of I would say the national team stuff transcends the level of amateurism as long as our players don't accept any money. And guess what? Our players were definitely not accepting any money. In fact, they had to pay for it.
Wow.
All right.
There you go. Aaron Castro, once again, dropping the knowledge. Thanks again, Aaron, for coming and joining us today. We really appreciate it, man. And hopefully the rest of your summer.
Thanks for having me on, man. I really enjoy your guys' work and look forward to getting more, listening to more scoop on the Canadian side.
For sure, man. We'll work on it. We'll go to work on it right away.
Yeah, after this long weekend, this long weekend.
Yeah, so
I'm not doing anything. But thanks a lot, guys. If you want to listen to us, we are available on most podcasts, if not all of them at this point. Follow us on Twitter at Rouge Rugby. Thanks again for listening, and enjoy what should be a very, very interesting game against Fiji.